I am Rylee. I am a YouTuber and a graphic designer. My upbringing was pretty standard. I'd say that there wasn't too much that was out of the ordinary. I just grew up in like a small country town with about 400 people, and we moved around a lot when we were younger. My parents would drive. My dad worked all over, so we would move schools, we'd jump all over the place, and then eventually we settled down in a small little town in the middle of Canada. And I stayed there from like 12 to 18. So it was like a lot of trips, a lot of stuff like that, a couple different schools, and then just hitting the normal spot and just growing up like you normally would. My teenage years were pretty good. I first discovered video games when I was very young. Basically, my dad showed up, he handed me, I think it was a PlayStation 2, and then it was just history from there. I played everything you could get, from like PlayStation games to Xbox. When I got my first Xbox, I was through the moon because I had Halo in that sick Kung Fu Panda game that no one knows about, but I remember. It was one of the best Xbox games you could get. And I remember my dad, he would just, whenever we were doing stuff or doing good on like report cards or anything like that, it was just, here's some games. He would just load them up. And ever since, I've just nonstop playing. They're a huge part of mine and a lot of other people's lives. I mean, a lot of people that I've met, including you, have been through games and all that. The stuff that's like a shared passion, right? I met Inertia, who I've been with ever since. And I met her in like grade 8, and I've been with her for a long time. But her and I, we've gone through pretty much everything together. And I just went through school normally, small country town, did all that stuff. And then I remember when I must have turned 16, this is one of the wilder stories that actually happened that I like to tell. My parents, they like my whole family packed up and moved to the bigger city that was like an hour and a half away, and they just left me in this like country house. I remember I must have slept till way later in the day, but they didn't really mention that they were going to be heading out. And I must have been 16, 17-ish. And I remember sleeping in the attic. I used to sleep in a little attic. And I would come downstairs and I was like, where is everybody? It was like everybody just disappeared. So I was looking around the place for any trace of them. And then I realized that they moved, like they took all their stuff. And when I was about 16-ish, I had my own house. And I would use it to just basically go to school and finish up schooling. That's one of the reasons they left me out there, was so that I could finish all my school and hang out with all the friends, everything I made, and stay with Inertia, who I'd been with the entire time. But it was crazy, just 16-ish, and I'm already like taking care of this house. I'm just there by myself looking for food and stuff like that. Just me and my cat, Misty. And I gotta say that was probably the wildest thing, because I was hearing stories about people who were like, oh, my family, it's like, we're going to do this after a while. We're going to do this. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm just here by myself. I've had my own house for 2 years. It wasn't the best house. It had a bunch of like leaks in it. And there was a bunch of like problems. Like I remember one time my dad told me that like the basement flooded because it rained there, and they have sump pumps. The basement flooded up to halfway. And I went down there and I called my dad. I was like, the basement is flooded. And he just goes, oh, go hit the sub pump with a broom or something. So I'm like walking through knee-deep water, and then he calls me again and he goes, there might be a live wire hanging from the roof. I was like, what the heck? What are you talking about? So I grab a broom and I'm on stilts and was beating the thing. I had to grab 2 step ladders and basically stilt my way over to the breaker to shut it off. They did leave me a car at the time, but I hit a deer with it and then I was stranded. And those are years when you really want to stick with your family. And I remember when they came back to that house, eventually, as soon as I turned 18, I was leaving. So I was going to the city to live with my brother, who was there. And I just decided to pack up all my stuff into like 3 boxes and just left. And I remember I was a lot less worried about going because I've already learned how to live on my own for that whole time. Well, when I first moved to the city, when my brother actually took me in, like I said, and I moved with 3 boxes, and that was it. That's all my stuff. So I didn't even have a bed, really. Me and Inertia slept on the floor for the longest time, but when it comes to... So when I first moved here, I didn't have work for almost a year, and a long time there were people who kept saying to me, you need to get a job, and it wasn't like I wasn't trying. I was applying as much as I could every single day, and just nobody was getting back to me. And this was even for like simple jobs where there was like that you could easily get them, right? Not a single call back on anything that I could just try to get a footing here. So what actually happened is that my parents would give me around $100 every month to basically live off of for that entire month. So that's like food, everything. And I remember I got really thin. I got pretty, I couldn't afford anything to make. Like, all I had was my little laptop that I had for years. It was a hand-me-down from my dad when he used to work. It was pretty rough for quite a while. And I remember one time my dad actually took me to the welfare office that's here because there was no work coming, and they didn't want to support me until I could find something, even though I was trying my hardest, and just no one was getting back to me. And that can weigh on your mental health quite a bit, where you think that no one is, like, you start to think there's something wrong with you, right? Because there's no way you can even sustain your own life. But I remember being at the welfare office, and the thing that really put me on like the war path for getting everything in order was I was standing in there, and in Canada, there's a weird way they do it. It's like you need money or something to survive and get food. Well, when you go to the office, they say, okay, here's the first class before we do everything. You go through the class, and then afterwards, they want you to come back for like 3 more classes before they even start giving you money for this stuff. Well, a lot of the people I saw in there were like, we're hungry now, type of thing. So when I remember I was in the middle of it, they said, come back for like 4 more classes, and I stood up and I said, why is everyone like, why are you doing that? Because there are people who need this stuff now, right? We don't have like months to go and wait. And I think they told me to like sit down and basically be quiet or something like that. So I basically just turned around and I just left, and like 6 people followed me out of the building. I had my Jesus hair there. I felt like Jesus, or like a follower of somebody. Like, my hair's long, so it's like, follow me, my children. I probably just guided them to ruin. I just wanted to walk out. I created my YouTube channel around, I think it was 2017, 16-ish? I think 2017. I've been playing games for a long time, and I actually, before I started YouTube, I was doing music. I love to play guitar, and I love to just sit there. And I remember same thing with my little house that I had to myself. I would sit in there playing music, and eventually I got the urge to want to record it and try to make songs out of it. So I started a channel, which long since disappeared at this point. But I went and I would make music videos and like try to capture my progress and listen back to things and see what I did wrong. And eventually I moved to the city, and that's how I first learned how to make videos and all that. And I remember when I first got my job, it was a night shift one because that was the one that would take me. And while I was super thankful I could do stuff, eventually my schedule was misaligned with everyone else that I knew. And we all played games, my group, but since our schedules were misaligned, I barely saw family members or stuff like that. And even Inertia, who came with me, I wouldn't get to see her that often. So whenever I would get the chance, I would play games. I would just get the idea of recording them and making fun little videos out of the stuff that I did, because it was a way of documenting the time that I got to spend with them. Because otherwise, while I was working this night shift, I didn't talk to anybody. I was just very quiet in my own space, and I would just go home, play games at night by myself because everybody else was asleep with our misaligned schedules. And whenever we were able to connect together, it was, I want to record this for, not really for just me, but also if I ever passed away or something like that. I got really obsessed with those ideas for some reason. They just kept like spinning in my head, because all you do is think throughout the entirety of your shift. There's not much interaction with other people, and me being from the country, I wasn't very good at that either. So when I was able to like record this stuff, it felt like a way of leaving something behind in case anything happened to me while I'm trying to figure things out. Well, the reason why I was like so obsessed with it is just that I would think in my own head, like, this is the only thing you'll ever be. You know, no one's going to remember you. You know, you haven't done anything of note, kind of, right? You forget all the good you contribute when it feels like you're not progressing in life. And every time you would like make a little bit of money, because these jobs don't usually pay the best either, but you'd make the tiniest amount, and then you just see that you barely made a dent in like moving forward, and years have gone by, and it's just like, well, what do I do, right? And then eventually you leave something behind for people. And like, it's not that I really viewed death as like the way to go. It's just that I felt like there wasn't very much out there of me. Like, and that the same thing, like I said earlier, my phone is always, it's got like 3 photos in it, right? I'm not leaving anything behind. But the best of me always came out whenever I was hanging out with them and playing these games, getting to joke and be myself, instead of someone who was more quiet and reserved at these places where I barely even said a word to anybody. So it was my way of just being like, hey, this is Rylee, this is him before, or this is how I want you to see me and remember me as time goes on. And I got to record quite a bit of that. My channel early on, I wasn't really concerned about how it went. It was mostly like Dead by Daylight, like just games that I was playing. I was just happy that I was making something and learning something. Getting to figure out how to edit, just the basics of navigating a software, actually was able to help me out a lot throughout not just like YouTube life, but also through regular life, because I was able to learn how to quickly pick up one software. I transferred how to pick up another one and then another one. That's actually the reason I'd attribute to being able to master and mix my audio, to record my audio, to use a mocap suit, to use Blender, to use all this stuff, because I basically learned how to learn, which was one of the things that was something that I never thought I knew how to do. And I'm thankful that the channel actually taught me how to do that. So every time I would make something, it didn't matter if it had like 72 views or 5 views. It was just like, I did something, I made this character gray. I made this, like, I color shifted it. It was the most exciting thing in the world to me, that I was learning how to do something new. That wasn't that sort of, it all ties back into that, this is all I'll ever be type of thing, where I'm learning to be more than I thought I would. And that's what made me happy about doing it. It didn't matter if the channel was doing good or not. Same thing I carry today. It's like, if the channel is quiet while I'm doing all this new stuff, let it ride. There'll be something cool coming. One of the biggest things I got was, there was someone who had cancer that I've talked to quite a bit, and they got pretty sick, and they were telling me, like, when they were in the hospital and everything, they would watch my videos and they would get to laugh because of the jokes that I made. But then they told me those like hard-hitting moments at the end that I like to put in, of stuff that I've learned and things that I say from like the years of things being a little bit more cruel to me, I will say. But because of all that, they were able to keep hope going and like keep themselves afloat. And after a while, they started to get better. And then just recently, they mentioned to me that they were cleared of that cancer, and they were so hopeful, and they actually used me as inspiration. They tried to use their Make-A-Wish to get to play with me, and I was like, don't do that, just message me and I'll come, right? It's not a big deal. But it was the most humbling thing that I get messages like that of people who are kind of going through the ringer, because things are tough right now. People are struggling, and just something that does keep me going is getting to see that I managed to spread a bit of positivity where I never thought that I'd ever get to see something like that come out of me, in a way. Being able to talk to you right now is something that I wouldn't have been able to do a couple years ago. I would have been just like a nervous wreck, but now I can just be like, hey, how's it going, right? And with, like, that's a whole bunch of positives that's come from it, but there is the negatives of, like, a work ethic being toxic in a way. Like, you take it to the extremes, you stay up really late because you constantly want to push the boundaries, and you like neglect your health. Like, when it comes to mental health, I've done pretty good at keeping myself like grounded and real, and not really in a bad way with it. So I can say that mental health has been pretty good. It's just ethically the stuff I'll do to my own like physical health, because I'd rather work 16 hours than sleep is usually a little bit dangerous. But other than that, I'd say that it's been mostly positive, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. You do put a lot of strain on the relationships around you whenever you can't focus on them as much. because the way that I operate with my channel and everything is that I work a full-time job, and then I also will work on my channel outside of that. And that doesn't leave a lot of time to spend time with people that you do care about. You always just constantly grinding and never really sitting back and enjoying things. Like, even when you have a moment to yourself, those numbers do kind of pull at the back of your mind a little bit, where you think, oh, I've gone quiet, my channel is, it's a little bit falling behind, or you see peers doing a little bit better in terms of like their numbers and everything, and then you start to like distrust if you're as good as you want to be, or if you can pull it off. Or I know some people who do it full time who are really concerned about, if they don't pull it off, then they don't have anything to eat because it's their income. But like, those things do weigh on a person, and I will say that I've been negatively affected by those things. But a lot of that, you're like navigating through that, just comes down to learning how to basically to learn how to accept yourself and the limits that you do have as a person, and not let them drag you down as much as possible. And the hardships mostly come from not being as present as I'd like to be, not just in the life of like the relationships that I have in the real world with, inertia, my family and everything like that, but also when it comes to the community and the people that help build me up to the place that I'm at right now. Like, I've seen in the Discord, I haven't been around as much as I want to be, or stuff like that, and that comes from too much work and not being able to, and only one person. And that's the part that's hard to balance, I'd say, more than anything. But once that gets conquered, or you find time to just accept yourself for the limits that you do have, things can be a lot better. In 5 years, I don't really think too far ahead. I see myself as doing what I've always done, just maybe with a studio. That's all I want. I just like to have a room, because right now I live in a tiny place, but if I had a room where I could just like record and have all my stuff, and I don't have to say to my significant other, hey, would you mind leaving the room for a minute so I can record better? I just leave the room and go to my studio. Oh, that'd be the greatest. That's the only thing that I think I could see myself. 5-year goal. A studio with those cool black eggshell curtain sound suppressors and a nice little room. That's heaven right there for me. And then just being able to make stuff as I go. Very simple goals on my end.
All right, Rylee, thank you for your time.
Well, thanks for having me.
The birth of Walmart Jesus.
Yeah, the birth of Walmart Jesus.